There's a new song we sang the second one in, and I thought I may look at that later. Now, at Christmas time, when I brought the message at Christmas Eve, I had mentioned that I had not done something like this for 12 years. After that, one of you encouraged me, saying, "Don't wait another 12 years." So a week and a half ago, when it occurred to me that I was going to be bringing the message, I remembered that encouragement. So thank you for those of you who have encouraged me, even this past week, reminded me of their prayers and so on. And the choosing of my passage was influenced by our study in the Ten Commandments, our midweek study that we're going through. And there's about 24 of us in our fellowship in 2 different groups that are doing that. And so I was influenced by that study that is, I guess, facilitated by Alistair Begg on the 10 Commandments. And last week, Aaron's message nicely precedes this one. At the time when I started looking into it, I didn't put it together, but as I was looking at it this week and reading and studying, I thought, oh wow, if you have not listened to Aaron's message from last week, check it out. Go online and listen to it. It was wonderful. I'm going to turn to the book of Deuteronomy and ask for God's blessing. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, your day. This is the Lord's day. What a great day to rest, to worship, to celebrate, to learn, to be taught. Thank you for the congregation that is gathered, for your family that is sitting around your word today, not only in this church, but in churches throughout our country. I pray for our country that as the message is preached today, it would change lives. There would be new life in every fellowship, in every church in our country. Thank you for the blessing of your word. And I need you to speak. We need you to teach us. And I pray that your word would be heard. And if I have misunderstood something, or if I have missed something, that will be forgotten quickly. In Jesus' name, amen. By the way, I totally expect that I have missed something or misunderstood something. Rod already read Deuteronomy 6, and so I won't read that. I'll obviously be reading it once I get there. Not the whole passage out of 6, but a few verses. The title, Stephanie asked me yesterday, do you have a title? No, maybe it was Friday night. Do you have a title for your message? I thought, man, I never thought of it. I don't do this often enough. So I suggested the All Command. Thinking of Deuteronomy 6. And you'll understand why when we get to verse 5. Could have called it the greatest commandment. Deuteronomy 6. This passage is part of a time of instruction that Moses is giving Israel. It comes after repeating the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are first recorded in Exodus 20 and are given 3 months after God miraculously brought the slaves of Egypt, the Israelites, out of Egypt, across the Red Sea, on dry ground. God is making good on a promise that he gave to their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would do this. Brother Aaron, not to be confused with the brother of Moses, Aaron, spoke about this in his message last week. Listen to it, by the way. Yeah. In Deuteronomy 5, the Decalogue is recorded again and repeated to all of Israel. Please note that the record in Deuteronomy 5 is taking place almost 40 years after God saved Israel from their slavery. So, where Aaron left off last Sunday and where I'm going to end up this Sunday is a time period of about 40 years. In that time, God is faithful. He brings glory to himself, glory to his name. He also directs his people to see who he is. Some examples of what the Lord wanted Israel to remember was, of course, God's glory, his presence, his provision, his power, his rescuing, his redemption, ownership, holiness, righteousness, greatness, just a few things. I want to just go through a number of passages just to show how God wanted his people to remember him. Exodus 16. As you probably know, God provided for the Israelites food for 40 years. He did this in the way of raining down manna overnight. And then he provided quail that blew in, so they had bread and meat to eat. This is what the Lord commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for generations to come, so they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the desert when I brought you out of Egypt. This was supposed to be proof of God's provision. They had never seen anything like this before. The forefathers knew nothing of manna. This was supposed to be evidence of God's provision for generations to come. Serve as a reminder. A number of weeks after God saves the Israelites from the army of Egypt, the army of the Amalekites came and attacked them. Moses has a young man named Joshua organize opposition to this attack. And through the power of God, they overcame that army. In Exodus 17:14, then the Lord said to Moses, write on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it. Because I will completely blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. At this, Moses worships God, saying, the Lord is my banner. I find it interesting that the Lord says, make sure Joshua hears it. Joshua is going to be replacing Moses 40 years later and taking the children of Israel into the land of Canaan. So it was important that Joshua knew that this win was given by God. It was important that Joshua knew who God was, that he was the Lord, my banner. They would be facing many nations in the decades that came. This was supposed to be written down so that it would be remembered, and especially by Joshua. Moses had, it seems like maybe a week or a week and a half later, Moses and the Israelites set up camp in front of Mount Sinai. And God reminds them there, "You yourselves have seen what I did in Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." God tells them, "You will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." He's reminding them of what he has done just a few months earlier, brought them out on eagle's wings. Who he is to them and who they are to him. A kingdom of priests and a holy nation, a treasured possession. So we're moving on to Deuteronomy chapter 4. This scene that we're seeing here is now almost 40 years later. The reminders just continue. Deuteronomy 4. "Only be careful and watch yourselves closely, that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen, or let them slip from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and their children after them. Remember the day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb." Horeb is another word for Mount Sinai, location for Mount Sinai. So, remember the day you stood before the Lord your God. I won't go back to that account, but I'll just bring out some of the description of that account. Thunder, lightning, thick cloud over the mountain, a very loud trumpet blast from nowhere. The people trembled. There was fire, billowing smoke. The mountain trembled violently, an earthquake. The people begged not to hear the voice of God. And here God is asking, do you remember that? Of course, this is 40 years later. The children and the young people at that time, you know how kids remember things? I'm sure they remembered it. God is asking, did you remember that? Those people are now middle-aged people. These are the people that are remembering or asked to remember. Here we see God's holiness, his absolute holiness, his power over the natural world. In Deuteronomy 4:37, they are said, ask about former things. And it goes on about from the time of creation to the other awesome ways that God revealed himself. Ask about it. Let's remember this together. And if you weren't there, if you were too young to know, ask about it, because you're supposed to be remembering these things. Let's recall this together. It goes back to the teaching from Deuteronomy 4:9 and 10. Tell your children about it. So now ask about these former days. Let's remember together. And speaking of the nations that were going to be driven out from the land that was promised to them, Moses says, remember well what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and all of Egypt. So, you're going to be driving out these other nations. And so, remember what God did for you in Egypt. For the Lord your God, who is among you, is a great and awesome God. This is the last plug I'm putting in for Aaron's message for last week, okay? Listen to it. Go home and listen to Aaron's message. He describes this. He brings this out so faithfully. That the Lord your God who is among you is a great and awesome God. Here we see that God is a promise keeper. He is faithful to his promises. He is great, sovereign over all nations, sovereign over Egypt. Staying in Deuteronomy chapter 8 now. Remember how the Lord your God led you in the desert all these years. Again, the Lord is sustainer. Staying in Deuteronomy 8:17. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives the ability to produce wealth. Here He's the gifter, the giver of ability. He's the provider. Deuteronomy 15, speaking of forgiving debts, forgiving slaves of their obligations, giving slaves freedom, and being generous to those who have served. God is saying, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. So, because you were slaves in Egypt and I redeemed you, you need to redeem your slaves. Because you were slaves in Egypt, you need to forgive debts. You need to be generous with those who have served you. Makes me think of the little verse in Colossians 2. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Again, the Passover, of course, was a festival, was a feast to bring back memory of what God did. Again, their redemption. God is a redeemer. Remember, you were slaves in Egypt. Deuteronomy 24, when it speaks about justice for all, Israel was supposed to be just in all situations. So the foreigners living in their land were supposed to receive justice. They were supposed to be treated well. They were supposed to be treated with justice. And the weak and the poor were also supposed to be treated with justice. Why? Remember, you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. That's why. Here we see God as a judge over Pharaoh, because they were slaves, and because of the justice they're supposed to show now, is we see God as a judge, and again, redeemer. Israel was commanded not to go over their harvest field and vineyards a second time. They were supposed to leave leftovers for the poor and the needy to gather. The fallen fruits and grains were supposed to be left behind so that the poor and the needy could come by and pick them up for their own use. They were supposed to be given an opportunity to, and some dignity, to do some providing for themselves. And again, why? Why was Israel supposed to do this? The scriptures tell us, because, remember, you were slaves. You were poor. That's why you're to do this. Remember. So, Deuteronomy 5, verse 6, is the preamble to the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments, as we have learned in our midweek study, is not a list of do and don't, but a path and a pattern for a free, orderly, and secure life. Here in Deuteronomy 5, it's repeated almost 40 years after they first heard it. It was first given. Moses is preparing the people to take possession of the land that was promised to them for generations, right? And in verse 6, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. This declaration is a qualifying declaration for what follows in the commandments. In the decades that passed for Israel, God was constantly teaching, reminding, testing, humbling, disciplining his people to help them see who he is, who he was. They were reminded that this God had revealed himself to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He had revealed himself to Moses. He had revealed himself to these, his people. The revelation of God's glory, obviously, was revealed to the Egyptians and the nations around, and so on. Israel's one God was set apart from all others. The commands that Israel received was to set them apart from all others. Verse 6 says, I am the Lord your God. Who? I am, as revealed to Moses and proclaimed to the Egyptian slaves. The Lord your God, repeated many times, many, many times. I actually read how often that phrase is repeated during these 40 years in the scriptures alone. I just forget what it was, and I should have written it down, but it was many times. They were, when they heard the Lord your God, they were to recall, the Lord is my banner. They were to recall God's glory. His greatness. He is provider. He is fearfully holy, righteous, always right, just in judgment. He has power in and over creation. He is creator, owner, and sovereign over all life, sovereign over all nations. He is king, giver, faithful. He rescues. He is Savior. He is Redeemer. Because of who I am, this is who I am, says God, you shall. Because I am the Lord your God, as you remember, who brought you out of the land of slavery, qualifies God to give these commands. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. That's pretty obvious, eh? I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall not make for yourself an idol. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Later on in that command again, he says, you are commanded, or you are to keep these commandments because I brought you out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. God did not save Israel because they obeyed the commandments, but they were to obey the commandments because God saved Israel. I won't go any further on the 10 Commandments here, nor do I want to study each of these. Instead, I want to look at the summary. This is the introduction. So I want to look at the summary of the 10 Commandments. And that shows up in Deuteronomy chapter 6. Hear, O Israel. Deuteronomy 6, 4, and 5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. Let's start with hear. Pay attention. Be ready to receive some teaching. Be ready to be reminded. O Israel. Who? Who is supposed to be listening? The descendants of Jacob, who were slaves in Egypt. This message is for you. You're loved. O Israel. Do you remember how he revealed himself to Israel? You're loved. You're set apart by God. Different from the other nations, a holy nation. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. Remember our God as revealed to us in the promises given to our forefathers, Jacob, as revealed to Moses, as revealed to us, the children of Israel, the family of Jacob. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. Not the gods of Egypt and such. No, the Lord who calls us his treasured possession. That Lord God, a chosen people for himself. Deuteronomy 4:37 says, because he loved your forefathers and chose their descendants after them, he brought you out of Egypt by his presence and his great strength. Because of his love, he brought you out of Egypt by his presence and his great strength. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. I believe this speaks to the unity of the Trinity, but that is way out of my reach, and certainly for today. So let's put that aside right away. The Lord is one. He alone is God. The Lord alone. He is not simply to be the first of the many gods of the surrounding nations. The many gods coming out of the selfish imagination and delusion of the Egyptians and the other nations. He's not simply to be the first of all of that. Deuteronomy 4:35, referring again to the greatness, the miracles, the wonders, the power, the awesomeness, the sovereignty of God, says, you were shown these things so that you might know that the Lord is God. Besides him, there is no other. 2 verses further, verse 39. Acknowledge and take to heart this day that the Lord is God in heaven above and on the earth below. There is no other. Exodus 34:14. Do not worship any other God. For the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. He demanded exclusive worship. Israel was supposed to be a one-God people. Kind of like I'm a one-woman man. That's a country song from a long time ago. I'm a one-woman man. Meaning, I have a covenant relationship with my wife and vice versa. Israel was to be a one-God people. The Lord is the one. He is sovereign, which means he answers to no one. He is supreme. He is self-existent. He is creator. He has all authority and worthy of all praise. The Lord is one. And again, because of who God is, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Verse 5 says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. Jesus affirmed this as being the greatest commandment, together with love your neighbor as yourself. In fact, he said, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commands. It's like I've got a big sign, big copper sign that says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. And on this sign, there's 4 hooks. The first 4 commandments are hanging on that sign, which include, have no other gods before me. Do not make for yourself an idol. Don't misuse the name of the Lord. Keep the Sabbath day. Under that sign are these 4 commands. And under the sign, love your neighbor as yourself, are the 6 of the 10 commandments that follow, which include honor your father and mother, do not commit adultery, do not lie, and so on. So these 2 commandments summarize the 10. Or you could say that, for instance, the first 4 commandments describe how to keep the greatest commandment. You could look at it that way as well. In any case, loving God and loving our neighbor are inseparable. 1 John 4:19-21 says, because we love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, he is a liar. For anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And he has given us this command: whoever loves God must love his brother. Jesus, God the Son, connects love for him with obedience in John 14:15. If you love me, you will obey what I command. Again in 14:23. If anyone loves me, he will obey my teaching. My Father will love him and come to him and make our home with him. He who does not love me will not obey my teaching. These words you hear are not my own. They belong to the Father who has sent me. So, Jesus equates love with obedience. Let's look at verse 5 then. Let's pick that apart. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. The heart is, of course, the physical organ of the heart. And sometimes I've wondered, why do we use that as a term to refer to, for instance, love at Valentine's Day or something like that? I don't have the answer. I just wonder why. Why has that come? It just seems like in many cultures, the heart is seen as, and I've heard it said this way, the seat of the mind, will, and emotions, is the center of the mind, will, and emotions. And after reading 1 Samuel 16, verse 7, we maybe can define it a little bit. The Lord does not look at things man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. We can begin to understand the meaning of heart as representing the true person or the real character within an individual, consisting of our thoughts, motives, affections, desires, and passions. And along the same line, on being concerned with what's on the inside, Jesus said in Matthew 5:19, for out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. And this brings to my mind the passage out of Jeremiah 17 that goes something like, the heart of man is deceitful and desperately wicked. Above all things, who can know it? Who can understand it? This gives us a horrifying look at the human heart. The sinful heart finds it easy to believe the lies of Satan and the deceit of our own selfish ideas. There's more bad news, and I'm sure that you guys know this. With all the reminders that Israel had of God's love, his holiness, his mercy, his saving power, even in seeing the displays of his awesome glory, they rebelled. My heart is starting to pound here. Psalm 81:11 says, but my people would not listen to me. Israel would not submit to me. When I was preparing, I kind of got stuck here. But maybe I need a distraction. I remembered a verse out of Psalm 119 that me and my little Sunday school class of Ayla and Denise had looked at maybe a month or two ago, and I looked for it. And it goes, look at the contrast here from Psalm 81:11, speaking of Israel's rebellion. I shall run in the way of your commandments, for you will enlarge my heart. I looked it up in the Amplified Version. It says, I will run in the way of your commandments, for you will give me a heart that is willing. To love the Lord your God with all your heart is giving God a surrendered heart. A surrendered heart is a repentant heart. But look up this verse sometime. Psalm 119:32. I will run in the way of your commandments, for you will give me a heart that is willing. To love the Lord with all your heart is giving God a surrendered heart. Let's move on to soul. Love the Lord your God with all your soul. Our whole being, our whole person, more than, but includes the heart. The word soul considers mankind being created in the image of God, given the breath of God at creation. Matthew 10:28 says, do not be afraid of those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. The life of the soul is distinct from physical existence. The soul lives on after death. The soul is spiritual life. It's eternal. It sometimes seems like the word soul and mind are associated in translation. Now, you guys know me well enough to know I know nothing about Bible translation or biblical languages. I read this in a Bible dictionary. Soul and mind are associated in translation sometimes. So because we are created in the image of God, our creativity, our gifts, our invention, our talk, our expression, our art should display that we are loved by God and that we love God and are transformed to Him. You often hear expressions. I put my soul into this job, my heart and soul. When people speak of artwork or music, often the word soul is used. It's more than just physical. It's more than just an action. It's part of your being. It's part of how you create things. So soul and heart are similar, but soul is a little further, a little deeper, a little more detailed. But we don't love God with all our soul, all the time, with our whole being, perfectly, with our actions and with our creativity. We are easily conformed. We are easily conformed to what's happening around us instead. And for those of you who have read through Deuteronomy, you know that the nation of Israel was challenged, was warned, was commanded not to conform to the practices of the pagan nations around them. They were to love God with all their heart and with all their soul. Did Israel obey? I see somebody shaking their head. No. Can we, by nature, obey Romans 12:2, which says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind? Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. The only way we are transformed into a God-loving person is when we have a new mind. Romans 5:17, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone and the new has come. The opposite of a renewed mind is a mind conformed to the pattern of this world. To love the Lord your God with all your soul and mind is loving him as a new creation, as a new creature in Christ. Let's move on to strength. Love the Lord your God with all your strength. Often it's translated might. Again, I got this out of a Bible dictionary. I think immediately of physical strength, but we know it's more than that. In other languages, the word will be translated power or wealth. So it is what a person has to make him strong. Some people have unique influence or resource or fame. To love the Lord your God with all your strength is to love him with all your might, with your power, your resources, your wealth, your influence, and with thanksgiving, with your everything. So worked out a little more practically, we could say, love the Lord with all your tools, your work, your job, your family, your home, your vehicle, your boat. The ice is going to melt someday. Your entertainment, your finances, your cell phone, your time. When we fail to obey this command, we have forgotten that all our strength, defined in a number of ways, has come from God. Israel was warned of this as well and reminded. Deuteronomy 8. Six to 18. Observe the commands of the Lord, your God, walking in his ways and revering him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and pools of water, with springs flowing in it, valleys and hills, a land with wheat and barley, vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey, a land where bread will not be scarce. You will lack nothing. A land where the rocks are iron, and you can dig copper out of the hills. When you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for this good land he has given you. Be careful not to forget the Lord your God, failing to observe his commands, his laws, his decrees that I am giving you this day. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, when your herds and flocks grow large, and your silver and gold increase, and all you have is multiplied, then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. He led you through a vast and dreadful desert, that thirsty and waterless land with venomous snakes and scorpions. He brought you water out of hard rock. He gave you manna to eat in the desert, something your forefathers had never known, to humble and to test you, so that in the end it might go well with you. You may say to yourself, my power and my strength, the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives the ability to produce wealth. I also want to turn to Jeremiah 9. (23, 24). This is what the Lord says. Let not the wise man boast of his wisdom, or the strong man boast of his strength, or the rich man boast of his riches. But let him who boast about this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord, who exercises kindness, justice, and righteousness on the earth. For in these I delight, declares the Lord. Pride in self and being self-secure keeps us from knowing the Lord. If I'm not loving the Lord with all my strength, I am deceived in thinking that I am self-existent. Trusting me, I'm making myself into a god. Or if I'm not loving the Lord with all my strength, I may have turned a good blessing from God, like family or a job or entertainment, into a god. The Bible tells us that Israel did not love the Lord in this way either. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths." Am I directing my own paths? Am I trusting in the Lord? So to love the Lord with all your strength is to trust him to make your paths straight. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. This exclusive, wholehearted love for God will influence every relationship. How we spend our time, how we spend our money. It will affect our speech, our behavior, our work. That's everything. There's no wiggle room. We have no disclaimers to make. If in fact God is supreme, as his word declares, our allegiance and loyalty can be for no one else and for nothing else. Deuteronomy 6, verse 6 says, these commands I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Again, referring to the heart, the seat of the mind, will, and emotions. God's commandments are to be foundational to our minds, our wills, and emotions. They show up in our heart, soul, and strength, and how we love. They're to be applied to our lives. I will just read through the next few verses. I had a few thoughts, but we got too much. I've talked too long. There we go. Impress them on your children. This is verse 7. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands. Bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorposts, the door frames and of your houses and on your gates. There's more to say on this, but maybe I could just say remember. These are things to remind us of who God is and who we are to him. I want to just conclude with the potential that we have to obey these commands. In this covenant God made with Israel, he was the initiator right from the beginning. And he was the sustainer throughout their years as slaves in Egypt and the years we've talked about. He set them apart with his law, which they could not obey, but he always made provision for their sin to be atoned for. In all their rebellion, God initiated a solution. And I believe he still is doing that with Israel and will do it. This all ends up being a foreshadowing of a greater deliverance through God the Son, Jesus Christ. And of course, you can discover this throughout the scriptures. God is the initiator in this new covenant as well. Alan spoke out of Ephesians 2, 4 and 5, maybe 2 months ago. And if you haven't heard it, listen to it. Look back. Listen to it again. It was a great message. Ephesians 2, 4 and 5 says, "But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ. Even when we were dead in transgressions, it is by grace you have been saved." It's an incredible verse. In our salvation, in this new covenant, God is the initiator. God has the solution. God made him, 2 Corinthians 5:21, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So if you, by faith and repentance, have surrendered your heart to Jesus and trusted him to make you a new creation, the righteousness of Jesus, who is able to keep these commands completely, that righteousness has been credited to you. And now I remember why I pulled this song out of Amber's sheets there. How deep, how wide, how long, and how vast the love of Jesus. How sure, how sweet, how strong, how vast his love for us. Jesus could love perfectly, completely, consistently. Jesus could keep these commands. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And that is why it is only from his credited righteousness that we have a hope to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. Let's pray. In prayer, I will be, after that psalm I found in 119, I looked through the Psalms and found some more treasures. That will be my prayer. Revive me. Revive us through your righteousness. Set our hearts free to love you. Enlarge my heart. Broaden our understanding of love. Give me a willing heart. Forgive our sin and take our rebellion. Do not let me wander from your commands. Open my eyes that I may behold wonderful things from your word. In Jesus' name, amen.